So we are going to talk about building a homeschool library today. I'm just going to jump right into the video. As you can hear, my voice is a little bit hoarse. I'm still getting over things. So yeah, let's jump right into the video. Hi, my name is Amanda from Learning to Love Well, and this is a channel all about homeschool from a biblical worldview. And if you are new to the channel, then you know that this is just what we talk about. Sorry, I'm trying to get a background that doesn't look like I'm shoved into a corner, but we're just kind of filming. My husband right now is currently taking over C.S. Lewis reading, and so I can come in here and quickly film this because technically I'm a day behind on my schedule. I have been homeschooling 4 kids now for 1 year shy of a decade, unless you count pre-K, and then I've totally been homeschooling for a decade. It is the channel all about encouragement, the practical, curriculum, all of those things. And today we are definitely talking about the practical. And so we are talking about building a good library for your homeschool. We're going to talk about what makes a good library. So this is going to change from homeschool to homeschool. Now I have 8th grade all the way down to kindergarten. So my library is going to look a little bit different than your library. My homeschool library is going to encompass everything from child books to actual reading material books. So it is going to definitely look different for everyone depending on how many kids you have and what your goals are and what your purposes are in homeschool. A good library is one that they are books that you either have very trusted authors or are kind of pre-screened, that you know that your kids can read through those books and you have zero to worry about. You know that this is going to line up with your ideals, or it's going to be things that you already know what's in it. And this is just a really good way for you and your children to be able to talk about things as they come up through the books. And it's also a really good thing to have on hand if you are one of those people that are just like, whoa, my kids have independent readers and all of those things, like what am I supposed to do with it? And so this is the way that you deal with that. You have a good set of books on hand to where you can pull from it at a moment's notice without necessarily having to go to your local library. So why is a good library important? This is going to change from person to person. So for me, I'm going to tell you why I think that a library is very important. One, I have the ability to select the books that are good for my children. I also get to select books that are older, that come from maybe a different series and a time period. So like, for example, let me see if I can pull it. This, I don't know if you can see it, but it says The Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation. This book was actually written, now obviously it's been reprinted, but this is from George Washington. Another thing that I would give an example is, this is a book that I was assigned to read in college. It's called Courage and Calling. It's talking about embracing your God-given potential. It is about how to honor God with my vocation, what kind of vocations you can use, how you can honor God with each of those vocations, even if it's not like straight ministry. So like, this is a book that I can use to kind of steer my children to like how they can, because some people go their whole lives and they're like, well, I'm an electrician, how do I honor God with that, right? And so this is kind of like one of those books that kind of explain like how you can go into your vocation, how you can honor God with your vocation, and all of those things. I can also select very sciencey books, like something like this, where we have the human body and my kids can go through and see the different parts of the body. This is a more of a science kind of library book, but it's something my kids can flip through if they are looking at something in their curriculum and they don't understand and maybe they need a reinforcement, this is something that we can pull in a moment's notice. Yes, I could go to my local library and get one for free. But honestly, if you know where to source books, you can find them pretty cheap and reasonable, and you are not breaking the homeschool budget. And we're actually going to talk about that a little bit later in the video. But yes, so human, like the human body, and this would be one of our readers and a good example. Another thing about it is you can source books that might not even be available in your local library. So like right here is The World's Best Love Poems. This book is actually copyrighted. Yeah, so this book was actually copyrighted. I don't know if you can see that, but it was copyrighted in 1927. This is not a book that I would find at a local library as far as being able to check out. Things that are older sometimes, things that are coming from a different generation of people where this isn't necessarily checked out a bunch. This is not something that would be locally available at a library. And honestly, the poetry in here is beautiful. We've gone through some of it. You can kind of see my bookmark in there. And I haven't gotten to read it as much as I would like, but I actually enjoy this poetry. And I love the fact that I'm reading something that's like 100 years old. That's pretty cool. Well, 2 years shy, 98 years old. So very, very, very cool. I like the idea that this is as old as it is. I'm literally holding history in my hands. So there are some really cool things about having a library. And by the way, this I actually picked up at a Seconds bookstore, and I think for a whole lot of books, I think I spent like $5 or something like that. So again, we're going to get into sourcing. So having a good library also allows you to pick out books that align with your convictions. So if you have a bunch of young kids and you want to make sure that it doesn't have any sexual content in it, for example, it is a really, really good idea to be able to have a good library that they can pull from, that you know that what they're reading is clean, that it's character building, that it's good, it's not filled with weird ideas. I am finding that sometimes is not always the case at your local library, because obviously they can put whatever they want on their shelves. And it's up to you to kind of filter through and use discretion. And so one of the really cool things about having a pre-screened library in your own home is as soon as they need a reader, you already know what it is. You know what publisher it came from, what the intent is a lot of times. Or you can put in books that are clean in nature and are upbuilding and suitable for the age group. Some people like fiction books, some do not. I do, but I happen to know that Jeanette Oak is actually a clean writer. She was a pastor's wife, and she writes love stories that are Christian based, but they're also clean. There's nothing in it that I have to worry about anything provocative or anything that I don't want my kids exposed to. And so having a library is a wonderful choice for that. Plus we can put in books that I know that they need to read for history or anything else. Like we have Beowulf over there, or, you know, we have the Diary of Anne Frank. We have all of these other things that I know that they do need to read for history, but it gives them the opportunity to do so without worrying about running into content maybe that they're not ready for. So that is why you really should have a library if you homeschool at your home. Okay, so where can you source books? Budgeting is always a really big thing in homeschool because we are floating the bill, and books sometimes are not cheap. I know I just put in an order to Amazon and I did spend like $97 on books, on readers, but that is because this year we are doing a challenge and there are certain books that I wanted to have on the shelf for my kids. So, but we took it out of a homeschool budget, so that's okay. Those are probably the pricier way of getting those books. However, there are cheaper ways. Like for example, this book right here from Jeanette Oak, The Sacred Shore. I bought it at a Seconds bookstore. There are Second bookstores all around. We have a Second in Charles. If you can actually see the price, we got this book for $3.85. So if you go to a place that's like a Seconds bookstore or something like that, you can get books that are pre-screened, especially if you know authors and publishing companies like the Bethany House Publications, or you can go to whatever publishing company that you know is a good publisher or a Christian publisher, or just go after an author if you know that they write clean books, if you know that, you know, they have certain convictions and they have certain writing styles. You can just Google books to look for. And in Seconds bookstores, a lot of times it's actually done by the author. You can go in there and start looking at other titles and look up reviews and things like that. But again, that was a $4 book. Some of these, like I said, this book and a lot of like our kids' books and stuff like that, which I can pop up a video on the screen of me and my daughter going through her books so we could see which one she wanted to donate and which one she wanted to keep. You can go in there, like our library gets rid of old books in their Seconds bookstore, and it's only by donation. So you can donate $20 and still walk out with a handful of books, and it works. Also, old library books. A lot of times libraries and things like that sometimes will have like their get rid of pile of books. And it's because of the fact that a lot of people don't check out those books. Maybe they're not popular books and they're making space in their library. Ask your local librarian if they have these piles of books that they're getting rid of and when they put them out and things like that. So you can also go rummage through those. And that's a free source of new library books. If you have younger kids, you have the Dolly Parton Foundation where she'll send a book. I think their foundation sends one book a month for younger kids, I think under 5. And that's where you can get, you know, just really cute, smaller books. Master Books has clearance sales all the time. If you have not gone on masterbooks.com and gone under clearance, they sometimes will call them scratch and dent books. And you can go in there and sometimes find books that were normally way more for a couple dollars each. And so that's also a option to source books. Amazon also, if you are just like, wow, this is like a $30 book, put it in your cart and put save for later and just randomly sometimes scroll through because they will hit sales at 40% off or 50% off. And sometimes they mark them down even more than that. And then you're paying like $10 a book versus like $15, $20 a book. So sourcing books is way easier than you would think. I know that when you're building a library, it might seem daunting. Don't let it seem daunting. Another thing is local thrift stores. So like, for example, I got my thesaurus, my dictionaries on like half price days, I think at a thrift store near us where I think it was like 50 cents. So something that if I would have bought brand new would have easily cost me like $30 at Barnes & Noble. And yet I got these big giant dictionaries and things like that for about 50 cents. So there are ways to source the books in a way that is pocketbook friendly. Don't let it become daunting. Don't let it look like, oh man, like I only have a handful of a budget. Go shop the normal, like your local thrift stores. Take a day. If you take your kids, they will find it so much fun. And just go through the bookstores. A lot of times the books are like 25 cents, 50 cents. If you go to the second store, they are a little bit more, like a couple dollars each. If you look on Amazon or Walmart or buy it brand new, those are definitely more expensive books. But even master books, like I said, like most of them are like Christian books and stuff like that. They also have pretty good clearance sales where sometimes you can get their scratch and dent copies for like $1.99, $2, stuff like that. I know I have a couple of books like that in there. You can source books that way. And also just put it on your Amazon wish list or things like that. Or thriftbooks.com you can get things on. They are still a little bit more pricey. When I was checking Amazon versus Thrift Books, actually Thrift Books was more expensive when I ordered my new library books for my library today. So compare prices, shop around, check your thrift stores, especially for younger kids. You can get away with way cheaper book options. And over the years, you'll be surprised how fast you'll accumulate a pretty sizable library if you are sourcing books well. And you probably didn't spend much money on it. So ideas for books. So for your younger kids, flip books like these, things that you can read to them, or I'll show you another example, like God Made You Special. Now, I read this to my babies when they were like in preschool and things like that. Probably will still read it to my kindergartner for a little while longer. There are things on master books. So this is one of those books that I was talking about that I got scratch and dent. And the only thing that was wrong with it was there's a little overhang right here on this, and I probably could cut it off, but I just haven't. And this is The Marvels of Creation, which is a nonfiction book all about birds. So that is pretty cool. And it's just easy pages, beautiful pages with pictures and stuff like that. These are good for a library. So if you are going to personally, okay, so this is my idea personally, I like nonfiction books. I do like fiction books, but most of the time I do like nonfiction books. Because when my kids are reading and they're doing independent reading and they are getting to look through these books, they're still getting science and social studies and history and all of those concepts reinforced by their readers. So that is why I do like nonfiction. However, over the years, we have done things like Jeanette Oak. If you followed us on the channel, we had finished the When Calls the Heart series and the Return to the Canadian West. We did try doing Love Come Softly, but it was a slower pace set, and it didn't have as much action in it as the When Calls the Heart series. So I think my children actually preferred to switch off of that. C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia set is a really good one. Plus you have like this C.S. Lewis box sets that you can get with like Mere Christianity, The Great Divorce, Screwtape Letters, those kinds of things. And that is also a good box set for your older kids. I personally, over the last couple of years, have really fallen in love with older books and things that were written in decades past, because some of the things that they wrote, we are missing so much in our culture today. So this was just like a different time period of how people presented themselves as moral and decent behavior, which, to be fair. Another thing with this, I also have the Poor Richard's Almanac from Benjamin Franklin. That book is honestly not what you would expect. You definitely get to know the founding fathers when you see what they compiled and what they believed in, but it kind of gives you another dose of history and kind of seeing what they believed and what they held to. Also, I do like the older books. I find that there was a different level of poetry, of grammatical insight, the way that they structured their sentences, the way that they spoke, completely different than what we do today. And I find it very refreshing. So some older books and some newer books, obviously, like having the classics in your library and having classical literature brings a little bit more of a depth to a child's education and understanding than I think a lot of people get educated in today. So having Shakespeare on your shelves, or like, for example, we have Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. We're going to have to read that. Or, you know, we even have The Little House in the Big Woods, or, you know, again, I talked about C.S. Lewis. There's the Screwtape Letters. I have Asking Tough Questions About the Bible, Demolishing Supposed Contradiction. I even have a book about John Bunyan, and we also have actual books from John Bunyan, like Pilgrim's Progress, and I'll have to put what it is, but it was written by John Bunyan. So these are really old, like they're older books, they're tried and true, they've lasted a long time. You know, I like both. I like both having the old and the new. Spurgeon would be a great person to have in your library. As far as theologically, we have books about Billy Graham. We have, you know, I have Gary Chapman if the kids want to learn about love languages. I ordered about John Maxwell for communication, because I want them to learn about interpersonal communication. There are so many things that your kids can learn through books and what they choose to pick up. And by having a robust library readily available at your home, like if your kids walked into a library, they probably are not going to go to John Maxwell and pick that out as like their book, right? But if you have it in your home library and you encourage like, hey, I read this, or I think that you should read this and pull it directly off your shelves. It does expose them to more literature than they probably would have read if they had just gone into a local library to pick it out. One, because it's not necessarily where you can find every book at your local library. There are online options, but having a paper book and just on hand for you to be able to pick it off the shelves or sit down with your 5-year-old and read, a book to them or something like that. One, it makes memories. Two, the feel of a book is wonderful. And on top of that, it just honestly opens up a wonderful opportunity for every one of us to have those resources on hand for our children. So if you have not started a homeschool library with your children, I highly recommend that you start looking at local sourcing options and start Googling things about like books that they should read before they graduate homeschool. Look at what's age appropriate so that they can start reading through it and that they can have a good basis of knowledge and books that they really should have under their belts before they graduate. And things that they don't even have to be necessarily recommended readers. Like one of the things that I just ordered for one of my kids is the Total Money Guide by Dave Ramsey, because he takes an interest in finance. So it's one of those things that you can really tailor it to your children and their interests and things that they show an inclination towards. So with that being said, I hope you enjoy and I hope this inspires you. Well, I'm checking out. God bless and have a great night.